Welcome to Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Mr. David Arnold. He is president of the Asia Foundation. The Asia Foundation this year is celebrating its 60th year of service to the global community. The Asia Foundation essentially works on and is dedicated to development in Asia. Before taking the reins of the Asia Foundation, Mr. Arnold spent a number of years with the Ford Foundation, serving a lot of that time in Asia. He later was the president of the American University in Cairo, Egypt. So we're very fortunate that our guest today has expertise both based on the Middle East as well as Asia. Welcome to Asian Review.
Thanks so much.
It's great to have you here.
Great.
Well, the Asia Foundation, great organization. Tell us a little bit about it, especially since this is its 60th year.
Well, thanks so much. I've been a great admirer of the Asia Foundation for many years, including from my time working in India and Nepal, Sri Lanka, where I've had the opportunity before I joined the foundation to see the foundation's programs and people in action on the ground in Asia. And as you mentioned, the foundation's history is one of really working at the ground level in Asia to promote democracy and development, and really to help improve lives and expand opportunities across Asia.
I know in the past, some of the programs that sort of stand out in my mind had a very aggressive library development program. It was into promoting regional integration, advancing legal systems, notions of civil rights, women's issues. Nowadays, climate controls are pretty popular.
Yeah. Well,
as I understand.
You've pointed to some of the signature initiatives of the foundation over the years. We're probably best known across Asia for our Books for Asia program, which started soon after the foundation began its work in the 1950s. And initially got its start because a university professor at Berkeley donated his personal library collection and asked the Asia Foundation to ship it to an institution that he had been associated with in Asia. Well, from that very humble beginning, now we're shipping 1 million books every year that are brand new textbooks and children's books that are donated by primarily Western and especially US publishers. So those books reach university students, high school students, children, community libraries across Asia in some of the most remote corners where, as much as we may see, the growing effect of the internet, there are still major parts of the region that really lack access to information, and the Books for Asia program has been a response to that set of needs.
Interestingly enough, I forget exactly when it was, I think in the mid-'80s, I was in Laos, and I happened to visit the National Library of Laos. And at one time, Laos was, of course, very close to Russia. Piled up in this corner, just totally cast off with these old Russian books, completely replaced by Asia Foundation books.
It's a great testimonial. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're right. We've done a lot of work over the years on regional cooperation. Many of the institutions that have grown up in Asia that provide the architecture for regional security, for regional economic cooperation, have their origins in early Asia Foundation programs that were developed as precursors to APEC, for example. Mm-hmm. There was an effort by the foundation to promote regional economic cooperation and integration that ultimately, over time, led to the formation of APEC. We've done a lot of work on ASEAN, and especially strengthening some of the organizations that are involved in Track 2 dialogues within the Southeast Asian countries. And for many years have promoted closer cooperation between the US and the countries of the Asia-Pacific region.
That's really interesting. Actually, I think the first time I heard about regional integration, the whole concept of which was probably in some Asia Foundation literature. Interesting. Well, talking about the nuts and bolts of the organization, the budget, 120 million a year?
Yes. Yeah, the foundation at one time was very heavily dependent on US government support. We were fortunate that we received each year an annual appropriation from the Congress, which really provides kind of the foundation of the foundation, if you will. It helps support our 18-country field offices and kind of the theme programmatic staff. That represents today about 15% of our total budget, which, as you mentioned, is about $120 million. The rest of the funding comes through cooperative agreements or grants from various bilateral and multilateral donors, from work that we do with the State Department, and also, importantly, from foundations and corporations that are supporting various program activities of the foundation. So over the years, we've grown from being probably 90% dependent on U.S. government support to today less than half of our budget is U.S. government, and the balance comes from dozens of other agencies and corporations, foundations, and individuals that support the work of the foundation.
The State Department money is independent of the congressional money?
We actually receive the congressional money as a specific line item in the State Department appropriation. But we also work with different parts of the State Department, particularly on democracy, rule of law issues that are very much a central part of the agenda of the Asia Foundation.
So how many people, we should probably mention, just for the benefit of everyone, your headquarters is in San Francisco.
We're proud of the fact that we are a California West Coast institution, and that's where the Asia Foundation got its start. That's where we've been based for all of the 60-year history of the foundation. And I think there are tremendous advantages for us to be on the Pacific Rim and in one of the most Asian cities in the United States, perhaps with the exception of Honolulu.
But you also have some kind of an office in Washington, as I understand.
We have a small office in Washington, which is both a liaison office for us working with State Department, with USAID, with people that are on the Hill, but also houses some of our program activities. So, for example, our Women's Empowerment Program, which is one of the larger areas of program interest for the foundation, is based in our Washington office, as is our work on international relations and regional cooperation, which, again, because there's been a heavy emphasis on U.S.-Asia bilateral cooperation, it makes sense for that to be in Washington, D.C.
Employees, how many employees does
Foundation today is about 850 staff, of which 700 or more are based in our 18-country offices in Asia, and most of them are from and citizens of the countries where we're working. So we're largely an Asian organization in the sense of the vast majority of our staff are citizens of the countries in which we're operating. Our San Francisco headquarters is about 100 people, including a warehouse in San Leandro where we have the books program, and we manage all of the receiving of the donations and the distribution to the various countries where we are operating, and then a small office of 15 or 20 people in Washington.
I see. Interesting. So what would be the profile of the typical what do we call is it called the country director?
Well, it's our country representatives.
Country
right?
representative.
Yeah, well, it's a very diverse group, and I think one of the things that's been really exciting to watch in the foundation is the growing diversity of our country representatives. Several of them are citizens of the countries that they serve. Almost all of them are Western educated and have then gone home to, pursue their professional commitments and public service values. Most of our country representatives have had long experience in the countries where they work, and I think what's distinctive about the Asia Foundation in terms of our professional staff generally, but our country representatives in particular, is that they combine deep country and regional knowledge with strong professional expertise in particular fields, whether that's as legal experts, as political scientists, as development experts, as economists. We have a diverse array of disciplinary backgrounds. what they all share are two things. One is a passion and a commitment for the work of the foundation, and the second is deep knowledge about the politics, the economics, the social movements, the cultural and social context for the work of the foundation, in particular Asian settings.
They work in a very sensitive environment, don't they? Dealing with issues of democratization and women's rights, and because you have offices in some pretty traditional societies.
We do, and I think the strength of the foundation is that we have the advantage of having been in many of these countries for a very long period of time. We're deeply sensitive to the political context in which we're operating. And we're able to, over time, create an atmosphere of trust and partnership with the organizations and the individuals that we're working with. Let me give you an example. The foundation was one of the very few non-government organizations that was asked to be a part of the peace building process in Mindanao in the Philippines. So that our country representative, who has been resident in the Philippines for most of his life and career and who's married to a Filipina, was actually asked to be a member of the international contact group that helped the parties reach the peace agreement that's led to the Bangsamoro basic law that's now pending before the Philippines Congress.
That's a very, very important negotiation, the Bangsamoro.
It is, and our country rep there now has been asked to be part of the implementation body that will be kind of the outside group overseeing the implementation of that law, assuming that the political parties are able to come to an agreement.
The representative is an American?
He is.
Okay. And married to a Filipino, as you
Yes.
said. Oh, that's interesting, yeah. I have the greatest hopes for the Bangsamoro. I think that that's potentially a very historic step forward.
Yeah. Well, we all are hoping that this historic agreement is able to translate itself into a new set of governance arrangements that will actually overcome years and decades of conflicts in that part of the Philippines.
So in your mind, what constitutes good governance? I mean, we hear that term all the time. We hear transparency, we hear accountability.
Right.
How does it all piece itself together?
I think of it in three components, frankly. I think that an important element is a process for the selection of leaders that enables citizens to have a choice and to have a voice.
That's a good way, a choice and a voice.
In most settings, that translates into free and fair elections. And, you may be able to have, people say elections are not the same as democracy. I agree with that, but it's awfully hard to have democracy without elections. So I think a key element of democratic governance is having a process for selecting and conferring legitimacy on your political leaders. Second is effective state institutions. These are critical. If a country doesn't have an effective and functioning legal system, if it doesn't have central government agencies and local government bodies that are capable of delivering services, of creating an environment for security, for rule of law, for people to access the justice system, they're not going to be able to make the leap into upper middle income and advanced nation status. So it's having effective machinery of government institutions capable of delivering is a key element in this process. And third and most important in many of the countries that we work in is having a vibrant civil society. And this is not just the NGO, non-government sector, but it's a wide range of associations from labor unions to a free press to business associations to religious organizations that together provide the foundation for a pluralistic and democratic society to function. So those three elements, free and fair elections, effective state institutions, and a vibrant, open civil society, I think, are the three building blocks that we need to work very patiently to develop in many of the countries where we operate.
Wow, you gave us a lot to think about there. We're going to take a break here. You're watching Asia in Review. I'm your host. My guest today is Mr. David Arnold, who is president of the Asia Foundation, and we've just been having a very interesting conversation about development in Asia, and we'll be right back.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. That's Ted Ralston. You know, Ted is the host of Where the Road Leads. It shows every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. It's about technology. It's about how people collaborate and solve problems with modern technology. It's where the road leads. We all know that. We should all be listening. Join us there, 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday. Now, what about that do you agree with?
All of it.
I knew he'd say that. Aloha. Say aloha.
Aloha.
Good.
Welcome back to Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Mr. David Arnold, who is president of the Asia Foundation. The Asia Foundation was founded 60 years ago, and its function, its goal, its mission is to promote development in Asia. Well, we talked about the Bank Samora before the break, and you gave us a really good and very meaty response to my question about governance. And I know a key interest of yours is subnational conflict, and I think that's where we should go. So, subnational conflict, what's that?
Well,
why is it a problem, and how do we solve it?
We think of the problem of ethnic and religious conflicts at the subnational level as, in some ways, one of the most critical issues facing Asia today. And it's interesting because one would assume that with the tremendous economic growth that's taken place across Asia, that you would see a diminution in the number and intensity of these subnational conflicts. The notion that a rising economic tide will lift all boats.
Right.
Turns out not to apply really when it comes to what are in many instances long-standing, historic, decades-long, in some cases even centuries-long ethnic and religious conflicts. Asia is today the home of the largest number and the most long-duration conflicts of any region in the world. And these conflicts, which are oftentimes with minority and ethnic groups on the periphery or the border of different countries. Myanmar is a great example where, you know, on the borders with Thailand, with China, with India, you have more than a dozen armed ethnic groups, armed opposition groups, each of which is organized around a particular ethnic organization. Those conflicts date back 40, 50 years. They're you know, more than 2 decades long, and in some cases even longer than that. The costs associated with the security response to these conflicts is enormous, and the estimate is that as a result of the resources that are diverted to the security operations, countries that are in the part of Asia that are still developing are losing a percentage or a percentage and a half every single year in terms of progress toward meeting some of their critical human development goals and indicators.
Would that be GDP we're talking about here?
It's measured in terms of the actual progress toward the Millennium Development Goals.
Okay.
And so there's an opportunity cost, and there's a cost in terms of falling further and further behind because of these long, grinding, expensive, and ultimately very deadly conflicts. Over the last decade, more than 100,000 people have lost their lives due to these conflicts. We estimate that up to 130 million people in Asia are living in conflict-affected zones. And as a result, they're really not able to enjoy the benefits of the economic growth and prosperity that's developing across Asia today. We refer to them as living in the contested corners of Asia. So they're really not part of the success story that we talk about in terms of the new Asian century.
You've mentioned Myanmar a couple times, and Myanmar concerns me. I mean, the U.S. is very happy that it's somewhat diluted Chinese influence in the country, and it's, I think, very proud of its support of Aung San Suu Kyi. Yet, some of the ethnic conflicts, subnational conflicts, they really reinforce the position of the authoritarian side of Myanmar, and it's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, we are pushing for a very open, democratic election system, yet these subnational conflicts pop up and they reinforce the hands of those who hold the ultimate power right now.
Well, I think what we've seen in Myanmar is a remarkable historic transition. And I think it's important for all of us to keep in mind that these things take time.
Sure.
That it's not a situation where you flip a switch and suddenly you overcome decades of authoritarian military rule and have a happy, open, vibrant, democratic society.
Sure.
Our organization, the foundation, was active in Burma for many, many years until the military coup took place. And then as soon as the change took place, we were able to reestablish an office there. And we're working closely with both the government and with civil society organizations on precisely some of these ethnic conflict issues, but also tremendous economic challenges that are facing Myanmar today, and also the question of how do you restart or reestablish a fair, open, democratic system and democratic process. I give the Thein Sein government a lot of credit for the steps and the progress that they've made in a relatively short and brief period of time. You've got a very active and lively legislative body. You've got a very vibrant press in Burma today. People are openly debating and discussing issues that were forbidden for many, many years. And you've got an active opposition force led by Aung San Suu Kyi that is holding the government's feet to the fire and is able to make their case both within the country and in international fora. So yes, it's not perfect. There are horrible problems in terms of minority groups, the Rohingyas in particular. Yes, there are issues in terms of the Constitution and the ability for Aung San Suu Kyi to stand for election as president. But it's important for us to keep in mind that this is still a very early stage in this transition process, and patience and perseverance, I think, is required by all of us as we watch and support and hope for the best in terms of Myanmar's progress.
I think it is true, as you sort of suggested. I'm not sure you quite use these words, but there are peaks and valleys in democratic advancement. And sometimes I think people in newly democratic countries think, well, everything is, roses, right? Peaches and roses. I mean, there are definite sort of valleys as well. And I sort of compare it to, the advent or advancement of capitalism in China. I mean, so many people are, oh, wow, great, market economies. Wow, we're going to get rich. They don't realize there are things like inflation and downtimes, and it all comes to them as sort of a brutal afterthought, a brutal realization.
Right. Well, we've been working on our own democracy for a couple hundred years, and I'm not sure it's still perfect. So
now let me say a little bit of a hard one here. You must get some, officials in some country to say, well, wait, you guys want to come here and tell us how to democratize and how to run our government and how to stamp out ethnic conflict, and your Congresses can't do anything. beautiful Honolulu, the streets of beautiful Honolulu are full of homeless people. And you have riots going on today in New York, Baltimore, and I forget where else, but and they all have sort of an ethnic tinge to them. How do you deal with that one?
Yeah, well, that's a conversation I have in Singapore with my friends there. But,
Okay.
but I think in a more serious vein, let me just emphasize the fact that the work that we do as the Asia Foundation is very much rooted in the countries where we're operating. We are not promoting or exporting a Western model. We don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to any of these issues. And we certainly are not in the situation where we're holding up, for example, the U.S. Model or system as, the best way to build a functioning, effective, responsive, accountable system of governance.
Right.
And I think particularly, in an Asian context, the ability to look at other models and other approaches within Asia is really critically important, because the experience of a Korea is a lot more interesting and a lot more relevant to many of the Southeast Asian countries that are trying to make the leap from middle income to advanced industrial nation status than where the U.S. is or how Britain made it through the Industrial Revolution.
Good point.
And I think we need to, and the foundation does, try and encourage and foster the sharing and exchange of experience within Asia on common issues and challenges that many of the countries are facing.
I have long been impressed, speaking of Korea, I've long been impressed by the rural development program that was launched by Park Chung-hee when he was president. He really understood that the development of rural society is key to a nation's overall economic development. I'm so impressed by the work that the Koreans did in that area. But on the other hand, I was kind of curious about this. The other day, I remember you at Pacific Forum when you were, delivering your comments. You said that you were talking about Korea, and you mentioned the Korean office is still open, and hey, Korea is considered a developed country, so why has it got an Asia Foundation office? And
right.
As you explained, Korea has some great developmental lessons to pass on. But then, on the other hand, I know the office in Taiwan is closed. I'm not sure how long it's been closed. And it seems to me that Taiwan has some great developmental lessons to teach. And it has a pretty maybe not the largest scale, but a pretty vibrant foreign aid program. And actually, I knew some time ago a gentleman by the name of Yao Zhaowen, who was a leader in the democratization movement in Taiwan. And actually, one of the early leaders, chairpersons of the opposition party, and actually an Asia Foundation grantee.
Right, right.
But you guys don't seem to be doing much with Taiwan.
Right. We have a liaison consultant there, and we do place loose scholars that are Americans that are gaining professional exposure and experience in Asia in Taiwan. And Taiwan is involved in a number of the exchange and kind of broader regional program activities that we're involved in. And for many years, the foundation had an office there, as you point out, including during the democratic transition process. And we were very much present during that crucial period. And I agree very much with your observation about the value of learning lessons from the Taiwan experience, especially in making the transition from an authoritarian regime to a more democratic system of governance. I think the choice in terms of where we work and how we work is really driven by a number of factors, including the availability of funding and support.
Sure.
And we've had really wonderful cooperation and support from many of the Korean institutions that we've worked with, as well as a group of alumni of the Foundation's programs that have created a Friends of the Asia Foundation support network for the work we do there, which is, I think, a large factor in terms of the size of our presence and ongoing commitment and activities in Korea.
Great, great. Well, we're going to take another break here. You're watching Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today has been Mr. David Arnold. He's president of the Asia Foundation. We've been having a really interesting conversation about the Asia Foundation's work, different approaches to development, and we'll be right back.
My name is Paul Jackson, better known as PJ, and my local interest is in sports. I have my own sports radio show at KWAI AM 1080 that you can stream live. I also have my own website, pjsportsradio.com. We have live guests in studio, and we talk about discussions and topics that everyone wants to know locally here on the islands. We cover everything from surfing to basketball to whatever's going on locally, sports-wise. We try to do our best and cover the topics in depth as much as we can. Once again, thank you for joining PJ here on Hawaii Sports Update. Mahalo.
This is Alice Lee Hagan, host of ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show here at ThinkTech Hawaii is every Thursday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon. I bring in interesting guests from Hawaii, the mainland, and hopefully international guests in the future. Do join us on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. Aloha.
Welcome back to Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Mr. David Arnold. He's president of the Asia Foundation. We've been talking about the foundation's work. It's celebrating its 60th anniversary. And we've been talking about development in general. Well, let me see. Oh, I know what I want to ask you. You work with the Bank Samora, and actually the country representative was a part of, a participant in negotiations. Another big challenge the Philippines has faced is the New People's Army. Has the Asia Foundation had anything been involved with that in any way?
Not directly.
Solve that?
Yeah, not directly. We've had a particular focus on the Mindanao conflict, and that's been, you know, an area of deep engagement by the foundation. And we work on a variety of other important issues in the Philippines. We've been very much involved in the work on judicial reform, work particularly with the court system, trying to promote and foster access to justice there. We've had a long-standing interest in the emergence and development of local government and under the local government code in the Philippines. And more recently, we've been working on economic competitiveness, because I think the Philippines has tremendous economic possibilities, and we've been involved and active in a variety of areas where looking at regulatory reforms and changes just in terms of things like movement of goods within the Philippines across the archipelago has been you know, a focus in terms of really making it easier and cheaper for people to have access to goods that are produced in one part of the Philippines but that are not easily available in other parts of the Philippines. So we have a wide-ranging program in a variety of different areas, but in terms of the ethnic conflict issues, that's really been very much concentrated in Mindanao.
That's a huge problem. If that one could be solved, the Philippines and the region would be a lot better off. The other day, Pacific Forum, you were talking a bit towards the end of your comments about federalism. Now, you spent a lot of time in India, and India is more or less inspired by the U.S. Constitution in the sense of federalism. What are your thoughts on federalism? Maybe you could share with us today what you shared with the Pacific Forum group the other day.
Well, let me start with a bit of a confession, and that is I began my professional career working in state government in Michigan, and then I worked in Washington for the National Governors Association. So I think I have to say that just to admit to a certain bias in favor of effective subnational units of government. With that stated and openly disclosed, let me say that you know, I think in many respects the Indian Constitution is a remarkable document in terms of trying to take into account all of the competing interests and tensions of different language and different regional groups, different religious minorities, caste system, et cetera, et cetera. And the federal construct that was developed in India, which is different in many important respects from the US federal system, was a conscious effort to, first of all, define state boundaries based on language groups. So you have Kerala for Malayalam speakers. You have Tamil Nadu, where Tamil is the dominant language group, and so creating robust states that really, more or less, I mean, none of these boundaries are perfect, but more or less accommodated the identity needs of different subnational groups within India. And then recognizing that the ability to manage and deliver services from Delhi to what are now 1.3 billion people is really not something that you can do through centralized bureaucracy. You really need subnational units of government that can help deliver health services, that can deliver education services, that can maintain order in different places. So I think the importance of federal systems, or at least functioning systems of subnational government, are important in political terms, in terms of giving people a sense of at least semi-autonomy as far as managing their own affairs and having the ability to have their political representatives engaged at the subnational level, and in terms of the efficiency of service delivery. So there's, I think, both a political dimension and there's just an administrative, efficiency aspect of having decentralized systems of government, which are particularly crucial in multi-ethnic states.
Right.
So, places like India, now having an open debate in Myanmar about federalism. In Nepal, the discussion and what's holding up the approval of a new constitution is everybody agrees they have to move toward federalism, but where do you draw the boundaries? How many states? What do you call the states? These are really high stakes questions. But I think in any multi-ethnic context, you have to look at these kinds of subnational arrangements.
Does the work of the Asia Foundation complement, enhance the U.S. rebalance to Asia?
I think we're a great example of, we never pivoted away. we don't have to rebalance. We've been there for 60 years. We applaud the rebalance to Asia. I think that it's critically important, and it's important not just in the security dimension, which is, I think, the piece that has been emphasized primarily by many observers, but the economic aspects of the rebalance, the effort to promote the Trans-Pacific Partnership is crucially important as an element of that. And of course, the political dimension. And I think, building and strengthening the ties between the U.S. and the countries of the Asia-Pacific region are, obviously vitally important, particularly as we're looking at the 21st century as the new Asian century. And the U.S. is very much a part of that new Asian century.
Right. Now, the other day you mentioned that you do have an office in China, and of course, any kind of NGO, especially a foreign one, is going to find itself in a pretty challenging environment in China. Can you tell us something about your the Asia Foundation's experience in China?
Well, we've had, I think, a very productive working relationship with organizations and agencies that we've been working with in China. We established an office there in the late 1990s, so we've been there for nearly 20 years now. I think that we are in a new phase under President Xi's government, as there have been concerns about foreign influence in a variety of different sectors. And I think there's heightened sensitivity right now around international NGOs operating in China. There was an investigation that was launched last summer that started to kind of look into who are these guys and what are they really up to, and that's understandable. We have always operated in a fully transparent way in terms of our work in China. We regularly share information about our programs and activities with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and with other organizations there. And we work closely with a variety of both governmental and academic institutions in China. But we have been following very closely the development of a new draft law that would establish a regulatory framework and a process for registering both Chinese NGOs and international NGOs. And we are concerned about an overemphasis on security dimensions of the work of the civil society sector, and are watching that space very closely, and we'll see what develops.
Well, we're coming down to our last couple minutes here. Maybe we could take, let's say, 30 seconds, if that's possible, to say a word or two about the devastation in Nepal, and then maybe another 30 seconds or so to, as unfair as that might be, to just say a word or two about the recent election in Sri Lanka.
Well, Nepal, I think the tragedy has been enormous. A loss of life, more than 5,000 people killed, thousands more injured, I would guess hundreds of thousands homeless because of the devastation. Our office, our staff, fortunately no one was killed. We did have some injuries, and we have several members of our staff that have lost their homes. Our office is functioning. We experienced loss of electricity and water, but we're now back in action there, and actively working with Give to Asia, which is our philanthropic partner and that helps raise money for disaster relief, to distribute relief and support many of our partner organizations in Nepal.
And maybe just a word or two about the Sri Lankan election.
Remarkable. I think no one would have predicted the dramatic shift and movement away from the Rajapaksa government. I think all of us kind of assumed that they were so well entrenched and established that it would really be very difficult to dislodge. And certainly the results of the January election were a remarkable statement by the citizens of Sri Lanka about the desire to move in a different direction, and I think they've elected a new government that will take them in new and I think more positive directions.
Like maybe it's going to be very interesting to watch Sri Lanka. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. You really gave us a lot to think about. If you'd like to know more about the Asia Foundation, could you tell the folks the website?
Yes, certainly. It's www.asiafoundation.org.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will see you next Monday when our guest will be Ambassador Ray Burkhart. He's known for his relationship with Taiwan as the chairman of the American Institute in Taiwan, but he also served as America's ambassador to Vietnam. This being the 40th year marking the end of the Vietnam War, it promises to be a very interesting show. See you on Monday, right here at 4 o'clock. Thank you.